So whenever I talk about the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, whether I'm recasing it or doing anything else with it, I always hear people ask me about the D-pad on it. And that's if I get a new one like the one I just got, or the Xenoblade one. I remember I took this apart, double-checked the D-pad molding to see if it was any different. And the reason for that is because people have found that the D-pad on the Pro controller for the Switch is a very inaccurate D-pad compared to others. Now, there are people who probably don't really notice it and it doesn't affect or bother them, and that's fine. But there are definitely people that have noticed that if you kind of go between like left and right rapidly, you'll eventually have an up or a down register just randomly. And that seems to be because the D-pad on the Pro controller is fairly sensitive to any mispress or slight mispress on either side, and that's something that seems to be an issue for a lot of people who are doing things like Puyo Puyo Tetris, for example. That's a good one. Luminous, even some platformers. This D-pad just doesn't seem to be accurate enough for a lot of people. And that's especially an issue since the only other real, I guess, D-pad you have is if you get a SNES 30, or of course if you use the 4 buttons that are on the left Joy-Con controller, which isn't really a D-pad, it's just 4 buttons arranged in the form of a D-pad for 4 different directions. And some people are fine with that, but of course, you think Nintendo, you think D-pad. I mean, they just recently released a fairly good D-pad with the Super Nintendo Classic that works well, and then of course we had the NES Classic, same thing, good D-pad there. It's very weird that we're to a point where the D-pad on the Pro controller is not very good or not very accurate, but it's been floating around the internet for a while how you can go about making it more accurate and actually kind of fixing it. Now, I have not tried it yet, but this is actually a post on a website I saw last year, I think like middle last year, and I saw it, I kind of glanced by it, and now that I've been looking further into it, I figure we would try it out here and see how well it works. And the good news is, the only thing you need to fix it is some tape. But I figure we'll be taking this guy apart, and I'll have a chance to clean some of the buttons and stuff while I'm in there as well. But I was going to do my Xenoblade controller, so that's the one I use mostly. I have tested it to see if I get that down and up randomly, and I do. And you can do that just by testing it, specifically by pressing the left and right buttons back and forth in tandem very rapidly. And eventually you'll see an up or a down kind of register. And that's more so to simulate when you're kind of playing a game and you get a little crazy with it and maybe you're going back and forth left and right. And you might see your character randomly crouch, or you'll see like your Tetris piece drop down right away, because a lot of them, if you press up, it'll just drop it. And it's something that a lot of people have noticed. So that's kind of how you can replicate it. Now, the idea behind what we're going to do is pretty interesting. It makes sense. We're basically going to be trying to block off the innermost part of the contact points. And we're going to do that using tape. Now, if you need a better, I guess, a more in-depth look at how to take the Pro controller apart, I'll leave a link to when I just completely took it apart for the video, and it was zoomed in and everything. It's probably much easier to follow that, and I also put it back together and everything than this, but I will say getting to where we need to get to is pretty easy with the Pro controller. Now, when you get it into 2 pieces like this, that's after you get the initial screws out, and this comes apart. You unplug the ribbon cable, of course. This part can go to the side. You actually don't need that side. You need the side that has, of course, the D-pad on it, and you're going to have to take that inner board out, okay? So be ready for that. You're probably going to take off pretty much the shoulder buttons and everything as well, since you got to get to this one board. But it's going to be easy because we can actually take it completely away from the shell and everything. Of course, be careful with your buttons, because once you take this up, you're going to have your rubber membranes and everything with your buttons and your D-pad. If any of them are sticky, this is actually a good time to clean them. You could actually take the rubber membranes off, kind of put them to the side. Sometimes you'll have like, you know, dust and dirt and buildup in there. You can actually just clean these if you want to with just like water and soap and everything. And then you also have a chance to take your buttons out and clean these as well, whether it's the buttons themselves. Again, throw them in some soap and water, let them soak up for a little bit. And then you can also take a nice little like cotton swab Q-tip and just clean up in like the little, the recesses where the buttons would go. So this is our board here where this is the D-pad essentially right here, where we have 4 different points. And the way it works is when you push down on that rubber membrane, what it does is essentially, you can see here, it essentially shorts the 2 points together, connects them, and when it does that, it registers as a button press. That's how it works essentially. And what we've seen is when we go back and forth here between left and right, more than likely what is happening is as you're kind of pressing left and right, you'll kind of be pressing back and forth here. This will maybe get hit a little bit, and it'll just touch maybe just the bottom part of this, like just the bottom. And the same thing can happen if you just press up and down over and over again. It'll accidentally touch like kind of in here or in here, and as soon as it does that, it counts as a button press. I was wondering if they had taken these and turned them 90 degrees so that you had to actually push further to the side to actually make it work, if that would have worked. But this is the design they went with, and I assume it's for a reason since it's pretty much stayed that way, whether it wouldn't have worked the opposite directions. But we can technically cause these to not register button presses on the innermost parts by using that tape. See, the tape will work to essentially block off those inner points. So what you want to do is when you have your tape ready, you're going to cut tiny little slits of tape essentially and just put them on the inside. And we're going to do that now. So I have my tiny little piece of tape here, and we're just going to take it and just kind of stick it on the bottom part of that point. So you can kind of see there how it blocks off the bottom half of it. I don't even know if you need to block off that much. I might actually move it down slightly, to be honest, just to kind of block off just that bottom part of it. And I'm going to do that for all 4 of these points. So I'm going to do that now, and then we should have a fully blocked off, I guess, inner part of the D-pad. Okay, and we now have a fully, I guess, taped up D-pad part. Now all the pads on the inside have been covered in tape, essentially, to stop the rubber membrane from accidentally touching it when you're back and forth on something like up and down or left and right. And at this point, I guess we'll just reassemble it and try it out and see what we get. All right, now that it's back together, the moment of truth, I guess. Does it work better? Does the D-pad not unintentionally hit other directions when you're shifting between 2 different points on opposite sides? And the answer to that is, surprisingly, yes. It actually works better. Now, I guess that shouldn't be very surprising considering what we did where we blocked off the inner half of where the D-pad would register for each input. But surprisingly, it still works well enough. Now, I did read some comments from people on that page that I had put. I put that down in the description for you guys too, the page that I kind of referenced for doing this. And some of them said that it was hard to press different points on the D-pad after they did this. And I think if you cover up too much of the points, it's going to happen. I actually recommend covering up no more than 1/3, so maybe even less than that, of each point in turn, like on the inside of the D-pad. I wouldn't cover up too much because all you're trying to do is stop it from pressing the innermost part of that point. So you don't need a ton of tape to cover each point. You just want to cover up the innermost point so it doesn't accidentally press either one. And honestly, I was a little surprised after doing the input test and everything like I did before, and I didn't see an up or a down get registered. I have to say, this is a pretty good mod. It only takes 10-15 minutes to basically take it apart, put it back together, and then you just need some ordinary Scotch tape or whatever tape you use to wrap presents or anything. It'll work fine. Technically, you could use packing tape, but packing tape might be a little too thick, and you might actually feel kind of the D-pad maybe have a hard time pushing down at certain points. But honestly, just Scotch tape from like your junk drawer or whatever should work fine. And yeah, good mod. It seems to make the D-pad at least more accurate. Now, I do think there are some other things that Nintendo could work to do, as in, not being able to press all 4 buttons at once, but that's, I guess, for another model of the Pro Controller down the road. Maybe like I don't know, an Elite Pro Controller or something. Anyway, thanks guys for watching. Make sure you liked the video if you enjoyed it. Hopefully it helped you out in some way. We got to try out this little modification and I guess approve it. So hopefully if you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to hit the like button, dislike it if not, leave comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.